have Larry speaking with us on the history and legal basis of the endangerment findings. So I'll hand it over to Larry.
Okay, thank you so much, Lindsay. Talking about the history and legal basis, we need to start with the Clean Air Act itself and there are three relevant sections. The first is section 202A1, which is right at the beginning of the title in the Clean Air Act that deals with motor vehicles. And it tells the EPA administrator that they shall, therefore it's required, that they prescribe standards applicable to any air pollutant which in the judgment of the administrator causes or contributes to air pollution which may reasonably be anticipated to endanger public health or welfare. So if it's reasonably anticipated to endanger public health or welfare, then it should be regulated. Air pollutant is any air pollutant agent or combination of such agents, such as greenhouse gases, which are emitted into or otherwise enter the ambient air. And then moving on, the question is, of course, public health is pretty straightforward, but the question is, what's welfare? Is on the next slide. This is the definition section of the Clean Air Act and includes a definition of welfare, which you can see all the different things that are there: soils, water, crops, vegetation. It specifically mentions weather and climate, as well as personal comfort and well-being. It's interesting to note that in the removal of the endangerment finding that the Trump administration just did, that they quote this section and they leave out the fact that it has the words weather and climate. Next slide. Okay, so the history of the endangerment finding. A petition was filed in October of 1999 that EPA should regulate greenhouse gases under the Clean Air Act. It was based in part on legal opinions of two EPA general counsels. 15 months later, EPA decided the general counsels who did this were under the Clinton administration. You're now in the George W. Bush administration. They requested public comment on the issue. They received over 50,000 comments, including during the comment period, the National Research Council, which is part of the National Academy of Sciences, issued a report on global warming that concluded greenhouse gases are accumulating in Earth's atmosphere as a result of human activities, causing surface air temperatures and subsurface ocean temperatures to rise. Temperatures are in fact rising. Regardless of the comment and the National Academy report, EPA denied the petition in 2003. Next. So the EPA decision, they said that contrary to the opinions of the formal general counsels, that the Clean Air Act does not actually authorize EPA to issue regulations to address climate change. They said Congress knew about climate change when they wrote the act. If they wanted us to regulate, they would have told us. They were also following a Supreme Court case where the FDA was going to make cigarettes drugs, which would have allowed them to ban cigarettes. Supreme Court said you can't do something that big unless Congress clearly says so. And then they also said that DOT has authority over fuel economy, and that's the only way to regulate greenhouse gases, which is actually not true. Even if the agency had the authority to set greenhouse standards, it would be unwise that there was too much uncertainty. It would conflict with the president's comprehensive approach to the problem, which, for those of you old enough to remember, there was no comprehensive approach in the George Bush administration to deal with climate change. And if we did anything, it'd be harder for the president to persuade developing countries to reduce greenhouse gases. Massachusetts and others, the state of Massachusetts and others sued. Next slide. And then the Supreme Court decided in Massachusetts versus EPA. The major issue was, has EPA abdicated its responsibility to regulate CO2 and other greenhouse gases under the Clean Air Act, and specifically under the section that I mentioned, section 202A1, which first section we discussed, whether EPA has the statutory authority to regulate greenhouse gas emissions from vehicles, and if so, whether its stated reasons for refusing are consistent with the statute. Next slide. So the Supreme Court, in a 5-4 decision, said that the Clean Air Act's definition of pollutant includes greenhouse gases. EPA's reasoning for not regulating did not comply with the Clean Air Act, that EPA must go back and try again. They need to make a determination whether or not greenhouse gases endanger public health or welfare, and if so, then they needed to regulate them. I do just want to point out that of the 5 judges who ruled this way, none of them are still on the court. And of the 4 judges who ruled against Massachusetts, that 3 of them are still on the court. Next slide. Okay, so EPA in 2009, we're now in the Obama administration, and they issue the endangerment finding, which I'm just going to very super quick summary of hundreds of pages. 3 reasons that EPA knows that the Earth is warming: the measured temperatures, in addition to measuring temperatures, which one could argue is not that accurate because you don't have thermometers everywhere. They also referred to widespread melting of snow and ice and rising sea level, both of which are actual physical changes in the environment caused by higher temperatures. Reasons why it's man-made is the physical understanding of the impacts of greenhouse gases, historical evidence, and computer models. Then they looked at the impacts to see if those would actually cause endangerment. Next slide. Now, I'm not going to go through these because a lot of these are going to be touched on by next speakers, but there were health impacts, agricultural impacts, forest, water, impacts, coastal areas, species, and natural areas. Next slide. Now, following Mass versus EPA, EPA promulgated the endangerment finding and a series of greenhouse gas related rules, which were challenged by a different set of states and industry. They challenged both the endangerment finding and the tailpipe rule, which set emission standards for cars and light trucks. The DC Circuit Court of Appeals found that the endangerment finding and the tailpipe rule are neither arbitrary nor capricious, and EPA's interpretation of governing Clean Air Act provisions is unambiguously correct. Next slide. The Supreme Court did not review the case, although they were asked to. The additional years since then have only provided more support for the finding, more evidence, the impacts of climate change. The first Trump administration did not challenge it, but unfortunately, next slide, the second Trump administration has done that. EPA is proposing to rescind the endangerment finding. In March 12th, they announced reconsideration. They said that the endangerment finding was invalid because it failed to consider the costs of regulating greenhouse gases. The 2009 endangerment finding, they said, were the first step of the overreaching climate agenda. That agenda has imposed trillions of dollars of costs on Americans, which is not true. For a generation, defenders of this agenda have avoided scrutiny of how it all began. That invasion ends today. They also said that the case of U.S. motor vehicles are affecting the climate is not proved, and new Supreme Court cases change the legal landscape. Next slide. EPA's case is very weak. The DOE science report that they based it on is very bad science, is being criticized from all corners. And actually, even if it were good science, its use is in violation of the laws around the use of outside advice for government decisions. The science itself is clear, and the actual arguments that EPA makes have mostly been rejected in actual Massachusetts versus EPA. Next slide. The RIA, which is a regulatory impact analysis, is flimsy. It has bad technology analysis and even worse economics. There have been multiple announcements by companies during the comment period itself, which is not that long. It's only been like a month and a half. And already there have been major announcements of new technologies, Ford's $30,000 electric truck, that are showing that the analysis is incorrect. They're depending on new Supreme Court cases. I don't know if you've heard of some of them, Looper versus Raimondo or West Virginia versus EPA. But regardless, EPA is misapplying them. And really, my belief is they're just expecting, hoping the Supreme Court to bail them out. Next slide. Just some years to note on the climate and global warming, that 1976 was the last year that the average land ocean temperature was below the 140-year global average, that 1998 is the only year in the 20th century that is hotter than any year in the 21st century, that the years 1970 to 2020 were warmer than any comparable 50-year period in the last 2,000 years. Next slide. The years 2013 through 2024 were the hottest 12 years on record. I've been using this slide in my classes that I teach at GW Law School, and I started this at 9 years, and we just keep adding a year every year. And in 2021, the Weather Service readjusted the normal temperatures up based on the last 30-year record showing higher temperatures. 2024 replaced 2023 as the hottest year on record. In fact, it was the hottest year in the last 125,000 years, 1.6 degrees Celsius over the 1850 to 1990 average. And next slide. And just my favorite quote on climate to remind us that we all have a part in this, that the definition of irresponsibility, no raindrop thinks it is responsible for the flood. That's it for me.
Good evening. I'm Jess Travis. I'm a program director with the Climate and Energy Project, and I've spent about the last 20 years embedded in various aspects of water in Kansas. Something I think about every day because I am located in Pratt, which is just west of the dry line in Kansas. Next slide. So even though we've had a lot of water out here in the desert of Western Kansas this year, humans can't really live where there's either too little or too much. And so, hotter temperatures means more evaporation, less snowpack, more snow melt. Heavier rains mean more runoff, in addition to that additional snow melt and pollution, but less recharge in things like our groundwater and our aquifer. And then these extremes of droughts and floods are causing unstable water supplies for both agriculture and drinking water, clean drinking water. Next slide, please. And why this matters for Kansas. So climate change as a topic tends to feel very abstract, but in Kansas it is not, because we depend on all these vulnerable water sources. This very abstract looking diagram of all of the major watersheds in Kansas shows you just how much of our land is used to recharge our groundwater and our surface water. And so this endangerment finding being under threat means our drinking water is under threat. Next slide, please. And Larry talked a little bit about this, but this graph really scared me. We see all this stuff happening, and we see these changes being made, and these are the predictions by 2100. It's one thing to look at the numbers on the screen, but this graph really showed me how quickly things are changing and how much of an emergency this is. Next slide. From our surface and drinking water, this is a picture here. Many of you, if you're from Kansas, have probably seen at least one of the last 20 hot summers we've had. That's a blue-green algae bloom. And as most of you know, if you're familiar with it, it is toxic to humans. It's toxic to animals and livestock. And it is the product of a combination of nutrient runoff and all those watersheds off all that land we just looked at and into our drinking water supply. So our pollutants are getting more concentrated from that evaporation. The city of Wichita depends on Cheney Reservoir for its water supply. Reduced stream flows means there's less supply and there's less dilution. These algal blooms tend to spike in July, usually late June, mid-July, and then we have to treat that water, which is higher treatment costs, higher filtering costs, and health risks for people who enjoy being outside and enjoy fishing and boating on the water. Next slide, please. And also, we can't forget that Kansas's major economy, our economy is based on agriculture. And so these hotter, drier conditions put an increased irrigation demand, especially out west here where we're growing corn and we're depending on the aquifer like the Ogallala Aquifer, which we know has a limited supply. Less surface water means fewer crops, fewer crop yields, and more farm stress. And this is something that's very real. Um, Mental health of farmers and rates of self-harm are directly tied to the prices of wheat in Kansas. We know that climate change and costs and agricultural stress is a major impact on life expectancy out here. Next slide, please. And the other thing that a lot of us don't think about are the native aquatic ecosystems that are depending on all these little rivers and streams. A lot of these fish you may not ever see. They only get to about 2 inches long as adults, but they are a very important part of the nutrient cycle. They are using nitrogen and or using carbon dioxide. They're expelling nitrogen, and they're a very important part of our natural ecosystem too. And so native species like the federal endangered Topeka shiner are at risk, and harm to biodiversity means harm to natural water purification and nutrient cycles as well. Next slide, please. And that is all that I have for you. Be happy to answer any questions at the end or answer any follow-up questions afterwards. And I'd be happy to turn it over to the next speaker. Thank you.
Hi, it's me again, Lindsay. I'm, as mentioned before, a program director for the Climate Energy Project, and I'll actually be covering the next two sections. I'll start here with the impacts on energy. Next slide, please. So energy demand is going to increase as temperatures increase. We're going to look at that being an increase in cost for humans who use energy. And simple economics, when the demand for something increases, the price for something increases. We also are going to be looking at some reasons why the future will hold less reliable energy under the rescission of the endangerment finding. And all of this will lead to a very significant set of human costs. Next slide, please. So increased demand. Jess showed that really beautiful graph that had the green and the red area. Scientists who study climate use different, what they call relative concentration pathways. So they model different amounts of greenhouse gas in the atmosphere. And if we rescind the endangerment finding, we'll be heading towards the highest one of those pathways. And they found that that will lead to up to a 75% increase in cooling days over the baseline by mid-century, which what that means is by 2050, you'll have 75% more days than you have currently where you have to use your air conditioner. Air conditioners are one of our biggest home power demands, and it'll skyrocket how much energy we're using as a community. That will then be compounded by other increasing load demands we're dealing with currently, including data centers, technological advances, the cuts we're seeing to energy efficiency programs, and our current aging buildings. This increased demand will lead to higher consumer prices and reliability issues as they rush and struggle to try to meet that increased demand. Next slide, please. So I put increased costs for utilities because utilities pass their costs on to consumers, so it doesn't really cost them more, it costs you more. More extreme weather events will damage plants, so like generating plants, not outside plants, and grid infrastructure, which will need to be replaced to meet demand. That increased load demand we already talked about will lead to increased fuel costs, again, because of economics. The more you need, the more it costs, and will require additional generation and transmission infrastructure investment, which again will be passed on to consumers on their bill. We're seeing this passed on investment cost in Kansas currently. And then a lot of companies are actually coming out against these changes because deregulation and climate chaos will increase the uncertainty in the business environment. And unfortunately, uncertainty leads to higher costs of capital as a way to mitigate risk to investors. So we see a decrease in capital available. Next slide, please. So that decreased grid reliability that I brought up, that's going to come from the increase in extreme weather events as climate change worsens because of the rescission of the endangerment finding. That will cause prolonged power outages. Increased load demand will also cause power outages. And utility generation will likely further favor fossil fuel generation, which is less reliable than renewables when combined with battery storage. And so the expansion that we were hoping to see in reliability for the grid will actually turn into a decrease in reliability. Next slide, please. Just back to the increased consumer prices, load demand goes up, the utilities will charge us higher prices. Same with the fuel surcharges, which will go up for the consumer as well. I just mentioned they favor building fossil fuel generation, and unnecessary regulations are being placed on wind and solar, which will mean that we get less wind and solar, which are currently cheaper for their life cycle than fossil fuel generation. And while the administration mentioned that this will cut a lot of costly regulation, that's in quotes, and they're predicting a 1 to 2% decrease in energy bills from the decreased compliance costs, we believe this will be offset by other factors. And one of those factors that is not a guess, we know, will be a 3 to 4% increase from all of the implications of the One Big Beautiful, in quotations again, Bill Act. Next slide, please. So human costs for energy, a lot of us don't think about what energy cost means for people. But more fossil fuel generation means more pollutants will be in the air, not just the greenhouse gases. Fossil fuel generation releases a lot more other harmful pollutants. We'll see deaths related to heat rapidly increasing, and more people will lose their lives due to that heat-related stress. Due to lack of access to cooling, both because a lot of people don't have access now, but we'll see power outages for even folks who can't afford their bills, and then more people being priced out of the market. And once people lose their ability to afford their energy bills, they start having to make really difficult choices that nobody wants to have to make. Do I keep on my lights or do I eat? Do I run my air conditioner or do I go to the doctor? So there's a very significant human cost to the energy sector. Next slide, please. I'll also be covering the impacts on our air. So next slide, please, Allison. We're going to see an increase in ground level ozone pollution, increased particulate matter in the air, which a lot of people have started investing in the fun air filters that like light up when your air is bad. That's what they're measuring, is that particulate matter. And particulate matter and ground level ozone pollution are what react together in the air with the UV from the sun to create smog. So when you see smog, that's what you're seeing. And that smog is what they are measuring when they do the air quality index days. So we'll see an increased number of bad air quality days. We'll also have increased climate pollution, which will be talked a lot about, and we've already talked a little bit about. And all of those things will also lead to significant human costs. Next slide, please. So ground level ozone comes from unregulated fossil fuel burning, and they're planning to, in this same ruling, undo tailpipe emission standards. So cars won't need to be as clean as they would need to be in the future with this ruling in place. This will leave plants, like this time I'm talking about the plants outside, so like trees and all of the crops, more susceptible to disease and drought, to reduce the agricultural yields. And ground level ozone is especially dangerous to human health, especially the lungs, but it can also cause other problems like heart problems and high blood pressure. Next slide, please. Increased particulate matter. Particles are carried in the air but settle over time. So this contaminates our water, and this also further damages the plants. They're very easily inhalable, and they can become permanently embedded in your lungs or transferred into your bloodstream directly, which causes many health problems. These are a lot of what cause allergies, asthma attacks, but they also increase your risk for cancer. because you have chemicals in your blood that shouldn't be there. And they also contribute to decreased visibility. So when we talk about haze that prevents us from seeing the city skyline, that's coming from this increased particulate matter. Next slide, please. So how increasing smog and the air quality index relate? The more smog there is, the more number of orange or worse AQI days. So I included the air quality index here for you to look at. Whenever we have anything over orange, we're going to see increased asthma and other respiratory disorders, and people are going to get stuck inside. Anyone who's considered sensitive will be required to be inside or wear a particle mask. And many of these sensitive groups are children. So these are kids who can't go out and play. Some of them miss school even. Next slide, please. And of course, increased climate pollution. The GHGs, greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, will cause rapid global warming. Extreme heat and stagnant air during heat waves increase the amount of ozone pollution and particulate pollution that people, especially in cities, breathe. And droughts and increased temperatures are causing wildfires, which add carbon monoxide and particle pollution to the atmosphere, in addition to the pollutants that are being released from polluters. Next slide, please. I lied. I said I was going to do 2. I'm actually doing 3. I'll also be talking about the impacts on the land. Next slide, please, Allison. So we're going to see land degradation, effects from extreme weather, less habitable and fertile land available for use, decreased agricultural yields and food security, and of course, all of those things lead to very significant human costs. Next slide, please. So drought and flood both alter soil chemistry, and they both accelerate erosion. With drought, we see the topsoil being blown away, and with flood, we see the soil being washed away. So it's 2 different sides of the same coin. We're going to see sea levels rising and coastal erosion that can either cover land or wash it away. So that'll eliminate a lot of coastal areas that are currently habitable. And then permafrost melt and desertification are permanently altering ecosystems and will change them from being arable to non-arable. Next slide, please. We're all already experiencing the extreme weather, unfortunately. So increased severe weather events will damage crops and our ecosystems, things like hail, tornadoes, hurricanes, monsoons. We're seeing more wildfires caused by heat and drought, and we're seeing wildfires from increased lightning strikes from worsening storms. And we expect increased frequencies in both drought and flood. Next slide, please. So all of these things are causing decreased yields and food security for our people. We're seeing climate zone shifts, which means that agriculture needs to shift too. Many farmers are actually already experiencing this and starting to shift crops. But unfortunately, shifting crops isn't as easy as just saying, I want to grow something else. It requires a lot of experimentation, a lot of trial and error, and a lot of new equipment, unfortunately. So this is going to be a really expensive problem. Damaged crops and reduced yields from weather, temperature, humidity, and of course, like I spoke in the last section, air pollution. And then unpredictability and instability is going to push people out of the agricultural field and decrease the availability of food in the system. Next slide, please. So not just the agriculture zones are going to shift, but habitable zones will shift. So places that we could live before, we will not be able to live anymore due to temperature and resource availability. I recently saw a statistic that Phoenix is going to start having days over 120 degrees. So I don't know how much longer humans might be able to live in Phoenix, Arizona, which I've lived there in the past, and there's a lot of people there. Soil changes, water availability, and shifts in season will make previously fertile lands infertile. So places where things grow will no longer be able to grow things. And then, of course, as I mentioned before, some land will be covered by rising sea levels. And so that'll be places people can no longer live as well. Next slide, please. And I will pass it over to Paige.
Hello, everyone. I'm Paige Kincaid. I'm a program director with Climate and Energy Project. My background is in public health, and I am going to be covering tonight the T and the H portions of wealth, which are transportation and health. Next slide, please. The transportation impacts from the rescinding of this 2009 endangerment finding are significant. There will be increased vehicle emissions. So no standards equals more pollution, which will unfortunately create a rise in carbon dioxide, nitrogen oxides, and particulate matters from cars, trucks, trains, and buses from those tailpipe emissions. We'll have increased reliance on oil and gas industry, which leads to increased oil imports and overall national energy insecurity. We'll have stalled innovation, decreased workforce, and lost jobs. And these job losses in advanced manufacturing and clean transportation sectors are going to be the hardest hit. Next slide, please. Increased vehicle emissions. Rolling back these clean vehicle standards would cause more than 8 billion tons of additional climate pollution to be emitted into the atmosphere by 2055. The equivalent of running 211 typical coal power plants for an entire decade. And according to an EPA analysis back in 2024, the transportation sector accounts for 29% of greenhouse gas emissions, more than any other sector in the United States. Greenhouse gas pollution from the transportation sector is directly linked to extreme weather events that have devastated American families and communities across the country. There's a picture right there from Hurricane Helene last year, and according to NOAA, there were 27 confirmed weather and climate disaster events that each caused more than $1 billion in damages per event in the United States. Next slide, please. Energy and fuel dependence. Eliminating the clean vehicle standards would threaten American energy independence, requiring an additional 14 billion barrels of oil imports by 2055 for passenger vehicles alone. And according to the American fuel and petrochemical manufacturers, this year, just 60% of oil in the United States fuel refineries is actually extracted here in the United States. Furthermore, analysis by the US EIA in 2025 projects that under the Trump administration's full package of policies for motor vehicles, American families will pay 76 cents per gallon more at the pump by 2050 than they would have under the previous administration's policies had remained in place. And you can see a graph right here that shows that inverse relationship. Next slide, please. Overall, the economic and industry impacts are very significant. Analysis by the US EIA projects that the Trump administration's full package policies for motor vehicles, including the rollbacks to tailpipe pollution standards, would lead to a net loss of 450,000 jobs by 2035. Further, more than 410,000 Americans are employed in the clean vehicle industry in 2024. Clean vehicle jobs have increased nearly 60% since 2021, and the sector continues to grow faster than the gas and diesel-powered vehicle industry. And rolling back the truck pollution standards will pose significant costs to US businesses, hurting job creation and raising prices for consumers. Eliminating the truck pollution standards will cause the heavy-duty industry a net of $2.4 billion per year due to increased fueling and maintenance costs. Increased freight costs are passed on to the consumers in the form of higher retail prices for goods. Next slide, please. And here we see the divergent path. On one side, we have clean air, good jobs, energy resilience, transportation for all. On the other side, we see we're getting locked into a polluted path with dirtier air, fewer jobs, energy insecurity, and costlier commutes. The choice is simple: protect the 2009 endangerment finding. Next slide, please. I will also be covering the impacts on human health this evening. Next slide, please. The health impacts, as you can imagine, are huge. Environmental injustice worsens, which rolls back protections that deepens existing health disparities. More pollution equals more respiratory disease, and air pollution fuels heart disease. So we're going to see higher baseline rates of asthma, COPD, heart disease, and hypertension. And it leaves a legacy of harm for future generations. Climate-driven threats worsen extreme weather events, vector-borne disease, and wildfires. Next slide, please. Extreme heat. This has been covered by everybody so far, and I'm going to go into it a little bit further. Nearly 7 in 10, or 68%, of households report that they or someone in their household has experienced health or medical problems caused or worsened by heat waves and extreme heat. And this is a report from 2025. As climate change continues to drive new temperature records across the United States year after year, the number of Americans dying from heat has more than doubled since 1999. Hotter weather also makes toxic air pollution much more dangerous, including pollution from tailpipes. Studies show that excess mortality is significantly higher on days with both high temperatures and poor air quality than on days with either factor alone. Next slide, please. Cardiovascular and respiratory illness are going to increase over time with the rollback of this endangerment finding. The risks associated with air pollution are similar to those caused by smoking tobacco. Exposure to air pollution can lead to cancer, stroke, respiratory, cardiovascular diseases, and other health issues. It is estimated in 2021 that an estimated 18.6% of all lung cancer deaths worldwide were caused by air pollution. Air pollution is now estimated to contribute an estimated 8.1 million deaths per year. This figure is comparable to the excess mortality caused by COVID-19 in 2020 and 2021. Low and middle income countries pay the heaviest toll, accounting for nearly 90% of premature deaths related to air pollution, and this is globally from the WHO. Slide is covering cancer. Motor vehicles are the leading source of cancer-causing air pollution, which can be especially dangerous for children, elderly people, and those living with lung disease. Shockingly, air pollution kills 13 people every minute worldwide. Several studies have looked for possible links between diesel exhaust and other cancers, including cancers of the bladder, the larynx, esophagus, stomach, and pancreas. Studies have also looked for links to blood system cancers such as lymphomas and leukemias, including childhood leukemia. And air pollution causes as many as 29% of all lung cancer deaths, 43% of COPD disease, and 24% of stroke deaths. Next slide, please. Fence line exposure. So 72 million Americans live near major trekking routes, putting them at risk for both chronic and acute exposures to dangerous levels of air pollution. Residents in these fence line areas are disproportionately likely to be people of color or come from low-income households. Regardless of income levels or geographic location, people of color have consistently higher exposure to toxic airborne soot. Research has also shown that the socioeconomic status is a major predictive factor for premature death from toxic airborne soot, which includes diesel soot. Next slide, please. These are a couple of infographics that you can enjoy taking a look at when we send the slides to you. Both are from nonprofits, but it does show the linkages between climate change directly to health, and it shows the impacts overall of increased greenhouse gas emissions in time. And that's all I have for tonight. Thank you.
Good evening. So as the slide says, I am Sheri Ellwood from Kansas Interfaith Action. I am the Rural Advocacy Coordinator for KIFA, which is a multi-faith organization advocating in the Kansas legislature and through public education on issues of economic injustice, discrimination, and climate degradation. In addition to rural outreach, I do climate-related work for KIFA. My other part-time job is livestock manager for Turtle Crossing Farms, and I am a former ELCA Lutheran pastor. So I'm going to put on my pastor hat for a moment. Next slide, please. So I want to begin with this quote from Martin Luther King Jr. "The church must be reminded that it is not the master or the servant of the state, but rather the conscience of the state. It must be the guide and the critic of the state and never its tool." And now, if it's okay, could we take down the slide so we can kind of all see each other, and I'll just talk to people for a minute. Thanks. So Christian nationalism and its ilk have indeed become tools for those in power. So people of faith who seek to continue MLK's fierce love and defense of the poor and the oppressed need to join with other people of similar values, like those on this call, to be the conscience of the state. Ignoring science, ignoring truth for the sake of greed, as overturning the endangerment finding would do, violates our core values, harms the poor and the underrepresented, steals from our children and grandchildren, and scorns the precious beauty and life abundant in the world around us. It is imperative that we stand up for our values. We will not allow future generations to be justified in saying we did nothing in this crucial moment. It is easy to feel helpless and hopeless, but we are not without hope. For some of us, our hope derives in part from our faith, but for all of us, our hope can be grounded in a factual knowledge that it does not have to be this way. Humanity does not have to be ruled by greed. Our planet does not have to ache under the weight of climate degradation. A better world is possible. One where equitable legal structures roll down like waters and ethical conduct like an ever-flowing stream, to paraphrase, but I believe get at the heart of a scripture from Amos. We know it is possible because we can imagine a better future, describe it with facts and figures, and delineate paths to get there. It doesn't have to be this way. So standing firm in this truth, we keep fighting, keep speaking up. And one of the ways we do that is by submitting public comment, as somehow mundane as that at first appears, but it is part of a well thought out strategy to get us from the mess where we currently stand to a brighter future for all people and all of our beloved planet. And so now I will turn it over to our expert to explain best practices for how we engage in this very important work.
I want to talk a little about how to craft a public comment. Next slide. So under the Administrative Procedure Act regulates how agencies, including EPA, set new regulations, and it requires them to propose new regulations for public comment and to respond to any public comments in any final decision. And even though in this case they're not proposing new regs, they're getting rid of it. Legally, getting rid of a regulation is the same as putting out a regulation. You have to go through the same process. After regulations are promulgated, they can be challenged in court. The person challenging the agency has to show they have an interest in the outcome of the case and that they've exhausted their administrative remedies, which means in this case that they've raised the issue during the public comment period. Next slide. So courts can overturn regulatory decisions that are arbitrary and capricious, abuse of discretion, or otherwise not in accordance with the law, inconsistent with the law both in what the agency can do and failure to do what it must do, unsupported by substantial evidence, and the agency must show that it's responded to all substantive comments. Now, just so you all know, similar comments can be combined and responded to as a group, so they don't have to literally respond to every single comment separately. Next slide. Now, keeping that structure in mind, there are basically three types of comments, and I say this as someone who's also run public hearings for EPA. There are comments that are designed to keep issues alive for a lawsuit, comments for your clients, meaning there are times when an organization will, especially at a public hearing, they may say a lot of very inflammatory things about the agency, just basically showing their kind of leadership for the people in the organization that they're leading. And then there are comments to make changes. There are a lot of times when agencies actually are open to new information. And if you have good information, that can actually help them change their decision or at least make some technical adjustments to what they're doing. Now, in this case, unfortunately, I'm convinced that this is not the latter. Um, and comments for your clients are kind of beside the point for this group. Although if you want to make very inflammatory comments because it's helpful to you and putting out to your members of your organization, you're certainly welcome to do that. And that is a legitimate thing that people do all the time. But really, the main issue now is comments to keep issues alive for the lawsuit. And in fact, your comments can be more than one type, but you should be sure that you know what type of comment you're making when you're making it. Next slide. So what goes into writing good comments? Know your audience. Who are you really trying to appeal to? In this case, I think the agency is beside the point. It's really the courts that are ultimately your audience. Be clear in your argument, lay them out clearly, don't hide them. Know exactly what section and what part of the agency action you're commenting on. Be precise and as clear as you can. Make sure to exhaust all your administrative remedies, and which is helpful in litigation preparation, which is really ultimately what I think we're about here, which is setting up all the issues that for litigation. The other thing I would say is that we having a lot of different comments um, touching on different areas is all helpful to really just delay, frankly. What we want, I mean, the Trump administration is going to have at least one full bite at the apple. They will be able to get this rule out. It will then go to court. What you really are hopeful is that there'll be a new and better president in 2028. And you don't want them to like lose in court and have a second chance at this. So more comments in different areas, just making them do more work and just delay based on how much work they need to do is just useful. Anything issue that you think they haven't really gone into detail on, I know our comments have a lot of, you've left all this out, you need to put it back in and open up a comment period on it. Because any of the major facts and arguments have to be out for comment. We think a lot of the documents they have in support are very weak. And so we want them to like, if you're going to say this, then you need to show it and you need to let people comment on them. Next slide. Okay. I saw there was a question about this, so take it away for the next group.
Yeah, I'll get through this and then I have a few minutes to stay on afterwards to answer some questions. I'm not sure if everyone else does, but I'll do my best. And this should be our last section. So, how to submit a public comment. I know this can be really intimidating for folks, and I know some of you are probably thinking, like, I'm not a scientist or a lawyer. Like, what, how do I even count? And the answer is yes. Every single comment counts, and everybody has a unique perspective that they can contribute to this conversation. So, next slide, please. The very basics. There's no minimum or maximum length to a public comment. So if you want to submit 40,000 pages to the EPA, you're welcome to do that. If you'd like to submit 40 words to the EPA, you're also welcome to do that. The comment period will close at 11:59 Eastern time on September 22nd. Do try to make sure that you submit your comments not directly at the deadline, because if there's a technical glitch or problem, they're not going to accept your comment late. In your comment, make sure you identify any credentials and relevant personal or professional experience that you have. And this doesn't have to be scientist or lawyer. It can be business owner. It can be mom. Anything that you think makes you qualified to speak on this. It could be someone with asthma. Any experience that you have, make sure you include it in there so that they know what lane you're speaking from. And then make sure you retain a copy of your comment in a separate file, because as Larry pointed out, a lot of these comments are going to be used in litigation later. And you want to make sure that your comment was addressed. And if it was not addressed, you want to have a record that you made that comment and that they did not address it. Next slide, please. If you are uploading more than one attachment, they do ask that you use the following titles, and you'll get a copy of this slide deck and some more information after this webinar. So don't like scribble this down right now. We'll make sure you know. But that way they can keep everything together. And the nice thing about this means that you can write a comment and then you can submit supporting documentation. So you can submit pictures or graphs or other things that you think might be helpful. If you want to submit something like a video, you also have to submit a written comment. And that goes for anybody who may have spoken in the public hearing. There were a lot of people who did. You actually need to also submit a written comment. And then this is really important because I know this is a lot of big feelings for everyone, and it should be. But we cannot use threatening language or profanity. It doesn't matter how substantive or valuable your comment was. If you use profanity or threatening language, the EPA is legally allowed to ignore it. Next slide, please. So make sure you're not including any copyrighted material or anything that's confidential. So especially if you're working for an organization and submitting on their behalf, all comments are publicly available. So if you put your social security number in your comment, they will post that to the internet and everyone will have your social security number. They must be directly submitted, so you'll need to upload your document. You can't provide them with a link, a cloud, or a file share. You can mail via mail a document if you're not super tech savvy. And then you'll want to make sure you include the docket number, which I have here. We will send that to you. Again, don't feel the need to write that down. And then this table just shows what information that you're required to submit to send a comment. So for anonymous requirement is basically no information. So you don't have to submit your personal information in any way to participate. Although the more information you're willing to submit, the more serious they're more likely, well, probably not the EPA, as Larry pointed out, but the more serious the court is to take, likely the court is to take your comment seriously. Next slide, please. So a checklist. You want your comment to be unique, as Larry pointed out. Comments that are the same can be grouped together. They don't have to be individually looked at. So sharing your personal story or your personal experience is more useful than sending a form letter that some group might send to you and ask you to forward to the EPA. Make sure you've included your credentials or experience, the docket number, that you based your justification on sound reasoning, scientific evidence, or how you will be impacted. And for most people on this call, it's going to be that last one. So talking about how it will affect you in your daily life or affect your children or your neighbors. You are the expert in your own life experience and your neighborhood. So you are qualified to talk about this. Make sure that you've included examples of how you would be impacted either negatively or positively. I can't imagine how it would positively affect you, but if you feel that, include it. Address any trade-offs or opposing views in your comment. So it is appropriate to point out what their arguments are and why you don't agree with them. Your comment is constructive, either positive or negative. A comment that just says this sucks is not going to do anybody any good. It needs to explain why it sucks. Again, no profanity, threats, copyrighted or confidential information, and that you have provided substantive data, facts, expert opinions, and that's the most important one at the end there, your personal experience, because that's what you're an expert in. Next slide, please. So I have this QR code that you can use, a bit.ly link, and the actual website down there for getting to the public comment page. Again, we'll send you the slide deck. No need to rush or try to put that down right now. Next slide, please. This is what the page will look like. There is a box. If you'll click next slide, Allison, it'll bring up some little graphics here. Thank you. You can type your comment in there if it's short, but I said earlier there's no maximum length for a comment, but if you want to put it in that box, you can only use 5,000 characters. So what you're going to want to do is create a PDF, a Word file, a document file of some kind, and attach it. They have a list here of the accepted file types and sizes, but there is no minimum or maximum word count. Next slide, please. You'll see this here where you'll have to identify yourself. If you click next slide, Allison, there's some more graphics that pop up. One more, two, I think. Oh, maybe not. Go back. Sorry. This one was just saying that the comment will be public, so no personal information. It will remind you in this form, but the information that you want to submit, next slide, that identifies you, you'll click an individual, an organization, or anonymous, and it'll bring up this contact information form. And then now if you click next slide, my little post-it will show up. You can go back in this presentation where I had that chart, and it can help you determine what information that you feel like you have to submit to be able to submit your public comment. Next slide, please. Make sure you keep that copy for your records, save it somewhere, and they'll also send you a receipt. You're going to want to make sure you save that receipt as well. Next slide. And then this is my pretty please with the cherry on top. After you submit your public comment, if you would be willing, and you don't have to, this is not a requirement, but if you'd be willing to send a copy of your comment and the notice of receipt you got from the EPA, which will include a tracking number, a confirmation email, or other notice. If you could send it to this L4GG, which is called Lawyers for Good Government, they're going to sue the EPA if they rescind the endangerment finding, and they need to be able to track the comments that are received by the EPA so that they can plan their lawsuit. So if you are willing to participate in that way, if you'll send your comment to Lawyers for Good Government, and their email address is here, and then copy myself at climateenergy.org here, I'll also help to keep track of who has submitted a comment as part of our outreach. Also, Lawyers for Good Government has some tools that they've created to help people write comments, including for community members, but they're asking us not to submit those to people without them going through the Lawyers for Good Government training webinar. If that's something that you're interested in, we'll send a link to that webinar as well so you can sign up and get their tools to help make public comment. But again, just sharing your own personal experience about your life and your neighborhood and your friends and family is more than enough, and you are capable of doing that now. But if it helps you and makes you feel more confident, they are doing those webinars and providing those tools, and we'll get you the link. Next slide, please. And then our last thing is just a pitch. We know you're here because you want to help. We're really happy that you want to help. Public comments are the main thing that we're asking you to do, but we do have another program going on right now for election mobilizers. So these are positions that are going to pay $500, asking you to contact 50 low turnout voters that you personally know in the state of Kansas using a cool tool called Voter to Voter. We'd provide you with all the training. It would be completely remote, and you only have to talk to people you know. So if that's something that you'd be interested in doing for this election season, there's just some information here on this slide.
Let's give all the staff a hand for all of their hard work. Great job, everybody. There are a few questions, Lindsay, that you may want to address.
Living in the United States is, I believe, the only requirement. I'll let Larry speak on that because he's more knowledgeable than I am, but I believe there's no citizenship requirement. It's just living in the United States.
There is no citizenship requirement, and they wouldn't know anyway. Actually, if you just did it anonymously, they wouldn't know if you were in France, Mars, or Topeka.
I see this question about should we submit to our lawmakers? Yes. But I don't want anyone to feel like they have to. If all you're comfortable doing is submitting anonymous to the EPA, I would rather you did that than do nothing. If you're willing to reach out to your lawmakers, they have power. And so if you let them know that this is what you believe in and what you want them to do, that can be very meaningful. Let them know you'll challenge, you're going to vote for somebody who believes like you do.
So it is technically the administrator's decision, but the administrator serves at the pleasure of the president, so he does what the president wants him to do, which is usually what the White House staff wants him to do. And Lee Zeldin has not shown any sign that he actually cares about the environment. So he, I don't think this is something that keeps him up at night.
I think most of us on this call who've presented don't have any false hope that like we're gonna send all these comments to the EPA and they're gonna be like, wow, that was really insightful and we changed our minds. What we're doing is we're trying to think of the right wording that Larry used, but we're exercising our administrative options, which entitles us to sue. So Lawyers for Good Government's trying to get people to send comment. We're trying to get people to send comment. There's several other groups who are trying to get people to send comment. The more groups that do that, the more that can be party to that lawsuit. And the more comments there are, the more points of entry we have to sue them to stop them from doing it. So I don't know that I'd say you're trying necessarily to influence anybody. You're trying to create a public record that can be used in a lawsuit. You're recording what harm will happen to you and your family. And that way we can say they did not address the harms that are going to happen to Gary and Gary's family.
Just throw in that anything you can say to either address harms directly from the vehicles themselves, like the air pollution impacts, is definitely include that. I mean, they're just going to dismiss the climate stuff out of hand. But the actual, I mean, the cars are driving on the street, the increases in the cost of gasoline, things like that, the pollution in your town from automobiles being increased, those things are definitely helpful. I mean, the climate impacts are good too, but those I think are going to be harder for them to dismiss because they can't say gas-powered cars in the US aren't polluting communities and neighborhoods. And they asked for DOE to do a study on the rule, and it said the price of gas is going to go up by 76 cents a gallon by 2050. And the extent you can talk about that impact, they're kind of stuck with it at this point.
Just a reminder, if you have friends or family, share this video with them when you receive it. Jerry, you always do a great job of sharing with your list so that we can get lots of people from Kansas sending in public comments. Thanks again to the CEP and KIFA and KRC and all the wealth partners for their support.